Ross, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks very much for joining us. This is a great development. I don't know whether you've seen the video yet out there currently on social media, but the great British public taking the law into their own hands, not by punching Just Stop Oil this time, but by just standing and sort of corralling, oh, here we are, we can look at it now, corralling them and just not letting them get out of that little circle, which I think is a brilliant innovation.
Well, it's a tactic that the police employed in anti-capitalist demonstrations in the 2000s, called kettling, if you remember, where they the police just kept these protesters in very enclosed areas, wouldn't let them leave until they were virtually begging to leave, and so they couldn't cause trouble elsewhere and so on. But, you know, I would say I'm no great fan of vigilantism, and, you know, it can erupt into very nasty sort of business. But, you know, in a civilized society, we accept that we don't take the law into our hands, but part of the deal is that, you know, we expect the police and the courts to take action instead. And, you know, with Just Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion, Insulate Britain, you know, we've seen the sort of you know, police just standing back, not taking any kind of action, just watching and even joining in the sort of dancing in some, you know, Extinction Rebellion protests in 2019. And, you know, it's really not on. You know, it is the duty of the police to enforce the law. You know, everyone has a right to protest, but you don't have a right to obstruct people going about their lawful day-to-day duty.
But also, you don't have a right to do it on a daily basis, day in, day out, in the same city. And I think that is what is different about these demonstrations. And I think all of those people like yourself who say everybody's got the right to demonstrate, well, yes, but you haven't got the right to do it like this, I don't think.
No, you haven't. I mean, you know, there's a big difference between protesting, you know, holding your placards or having a, you know, organised march and so on, and doing what Extinction Rebellion and all these groups have been doing for years, which is, you know, to obstruct people. And, you know, look what happened when finally the police and the courts took action against those protesters who were blocking the M25. And there was 3 who had climbed a gantry and they were sent down to prison for about 3 years, I think. And those M25 protests stopped at that point because, you know, protesters realised it was not worth the risk of, you know, blocking motorways when they'd be sent to jail for 3 years. Now, why are we not repeating, or why are the police not repeating that now? And, you know, with these endless street protests and stopping sports.
Well, what we saw yesterday was the sort of the extreme end of it, I suppose. And as we've said before, we absolutely sympathise with the guy who got involved in the punch-up, but you wouldn't want to see too much of that. But there were no police anywhere to be seen. And I said yesterday, this has surely got to be placed very much at the door of the police. The police have to be there to stop these kinds of incidents from happening.
Yes, and not just the police, obviously the Crown Prosecution Service, the courts and the whole criminal justice system. But, you know, where you've got protesters who are doing this day in, day out, they keep getting arrested, then released, or they get a sort of charge. You know, if they're charged, it's a little fine, a slap round the wrist, and they're back on the street the next day. You know, if they're in jail for, you know, you do it over and over and over again, you go down for 3 years, and that takes you out of circulation. You can't then protest for 3 years while you're in jail. So, you know, we need to start, you know, taking action on that sort of level, as we did indeed against that M25.
Yes, I'm seeing as well that Grant Shapps actually has finally done something useful. He's written a letter to Sir Keir Starmer after they spray painted the energy headquarters, government energy security and net zero department yesterday. He's asking for the Labour Party to pay for it, given that they're in support apparently of Just Stop Oil, and they're also in receipt of money from Dale Vince, who's also a supporter of Just Stop Oil.
Yes, I mean, obviously a bit of politicking on Grant Shapps' part, and it's not really Keir Starmer's responsibility. But I wish the protesters should certainly be paying that bill, and they should be fined, you know, large amounts as well as being sent to jail. But yeah, Labour has, you know, Keir Starmer in recent weeks has sort of tried to move a little bit on Just Stop Oil and say he doesn't support their methods and so on. But I mean, for months and months, I mean, Labour have been sort of supporting them them really, or certainly not condemning them, not criticising them, and they did accept that big donation from Dale Vince, who was also a financial supporter of Just Stop Oil, of course. So,
Yes.
you know, I mean, if Labour don't take a tough line on Just Stop Oil, you know, they will suffer at the ballot box, put it that way.
Yes, I think so. And obviously we can't talk about ballot boxes today because there is a by-election underway. But the one thing we know, if you were to ask ordinary working people up and down the country about what it is that they care about when it comes to pollution and when it comes to clean air, is they don't want to be paying massive charges to drive their cars around cities.
No, and, you know, it's not just the London ultra-low emission zone, which, of course, has had a huge amount of coverage. There's all manner of cities, Bristol, Birmingham, Glasgow, Dundee, they've all...
Newcastle as well.
Newcastle, low emission zones in recent months. Canterbury, Oxford, looking at these sort of bizarre schemes where you zone the city and then you fine or charge motorists for driving between different zones. Cambridge is suggesting a congestion charge. And I mean, motorists are actually quite right to, you know, think that people are ganging up against them and trying to force them out of their cars. Because, I mean, if you read the government's net zero strategy, I mean, part of it very much is to reduce road traffic. And, you know, you think of the sort of charges, restrictions and bans on petrol and diesel and so on. You know, it's more than just cutting emissions. It's more than just raising revenue. There is a big sort of strategy there to rein in road traffic as part of this sort of net zero by 2050 target.
I know, absolutely extraordinary stuff. Ross, good to see you. You got the cover of The Spectator this week, so look out for that as well.